Hey there, members of the Night Crew, and folks who just love horror. Welcome to the Night Crew podcast, where shadows breathe and monsters listen. This is the podcast where we get cozy with the creepy, the frightening, and the just plain undead. I'm your host, Brad Ricks. So I'm back from taking a holiday break. I've got a string of great author interviews and monster episodes coming up. Make sure you like the show, share it, tell a friend, all that jazz. Now, before we get to today's interview, you want some of my updates. The Night Crew 2 Bloodlust came out in November, is available on Amazon or my website, bradricks.com. If you haven't started the Night Crew series, what are you waiting for? I just sent back the first round of edits for the Night Crew 3 Hunting Ground. Talking covers, which I'm hoping is even better than the Night Crew 2's, if that's even possible. We're looking at July for that one. And number 4 is currently in progress. I can't wait for you to see what's in store. Are you as excited as I am? Also, over the break, I took some time off from work and powered through a new standalone novel. It's about a team on a rescue mission in the frozen tundra of Siberia. It's cold, it's brutal, and it tests the limits of human endurance in an unforgiving environment. I'm doing my round of edits before I shop it around to publishers. You're going to love this one. I think it's my best work so far. Also, if you're a fan of the Night Crew podcast and would like to order a t-shirt, they are available on my website. Hop over and order yourself one. All right, enough of the updates. On today's episode, I sat down with author Jon Cohn. He's an amazing person and talent of such works as Kill Beth and Slash Tag. We talk about his latest novel, The Creed Falls Massacres, his board game designs, and being afraid of everything. Into the virtual studio we go. All right, so today I am thrilled to have Jon Cohn in the virtual studio with me. Jon, how are you doing this evening, afternoon, wherever you are listening to it at the moment?
Hey, Brad. I'm good. I'm excited to be here, excited to be talking to you. It's been a minute since we've been able to chat, so it's always great to see a friendly face in the new year.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think the last time we met up was Books and Brews, I think.
Yeah, it was. And that was a lot of fun for, I think you had a good time, right? I had a good time.
Yeah, it was fun. I got to kind of just wander around and, hang out with random people and chat with folks. So yeah, it was great.
That was my experience the first time at Books and Brews. I went to the first one as just a reader, and I got to meet everybody else. I talked about getting a table, and then I was like, well, it's really far away and it's going to be tough to go. No, thanks. And then I saw literally everyone that I had become friends with was going and getting a table. And I reached back. I was like, actually, can I get a table? I was like, no, you let that ship sail, sir. No. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to come anyways. So it was a lot of fun though.
I was the same way. I was like, there was a couple of other events that were kind of going on across the country at that same time, but none of which I ended up getting a table for. And, they were all kind of sold out at the time. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to go. And yeah, I'd get to go and hang out with everybody. And, it'd be a fun little, just kind of hang out weekend. And it was, I had a blast. So.
It's, the indie horror community of readers and authors. It's such a special group of people because they do become in a lot of ways kind of like your extended family. It's like when you go home or you visit with old high school friends or college friends when there's like a wedding. And it's like, oh, wow, great. Oh, I haven't seen you guys in years. Oh, it's so great to catch up. And you kind of have this mini reunion. And it's weird having a reunion with people some of whom you've never met in person, but you're like, oh, here we are all back in the same place for the first time.
Right. Yeah, I know that my very first event that I did was kind of a big event where a lot of people who I've been chatting with online and, that I did was Dark Drafts, which is coming up again. I think by the time this episode drops, would have just had ended for this year. But, and so, in our group chat, this last year in the group chat, there was a lot of conversation about, oh yeah, we're going to go to lunch on the day everybody was kind of getting in. And so I kind of got a little late and I was like, I walked into this little cafe, little diner thing that was in that town. And, I'm like scanning. I'm like, who are people that I may recognize a Facebook photo from? And then from the distance, I hear my name hollered out and it's Lauren Young screaming across the restaurant. Yeah. And then I got to, sit down and meet everybody.
Right. So absolutely. It's almost like you're just catching up, but you're finally like, you're having that face, you're hearing their voice, which for a lot of people, I hadn't had that experience with them before sitting down, but you sit down and you open up into a conversation like you've been friends for decades. Right. It's such a cool thing. It's such a special thing. This year, I'm taking some time off because we kind of have talked about this, that you don't really go to these conventions to make money. You go because you want to connect with people, you want to get your books out there, but also you want to hang out with all of your online friends. Last year, I went to, I think, a couple more than I should have, than my budget really allowed. This year, my wife and I, we sat down and we had a much more budget focused conversation rather than leading with our hearts. We led with our heads and our wallets. And so it became clear that we weren't going to be able to do that this year, maybe next year. The only one that we're planning on going to is Massacre on the Mountain, which is up in Oregon, partially because we can drive there, but it's still like a 20-hour drive for us. So we're turning it into a whole kind of week of road trip. And it's going to be my birthday. So the event is something like the 25th through the 27th. My birthday is September 28th. So we're going to turn it into like a whole birthday road trip. We're going to stay at haunted hotels, visit haunted places. That's kind of my wife's always her in on something. It's like, oh, let's go somewhere. She goes, okay, well, whatever city it is. Well, does it have a haunted hotel? How haunted is this place? And that's really that's the selling point. That's how I can get her in on stuff is how haunted of a place is there that we can stay? How many haunted places are there in the vicinity of where we're going to stay? Oh, there's a lot. Great. We're in.
Nice. That's definitely a good selling point. I spent a lot of time doing events down in like San Antonio. San Antonio has a whole lot of them, a lot of horror related kind of events. And it was a good number of haunted hotels in San Antonio. They're always fun to stay at, especially around the Alamo.
I could imagine.
Yeah.
I've only been to Fort Worth, Texas, which was lovely, but also did not seem to have much of a haunted scene.
Oh, now Fort Worth does. Yes, you get down to San Antonio and it does. It's awesome down there.
I can believe it.
All right. So I always like to start with that wonderful, author question that we get all the time, which is, tell me about your writing career. How long have you been writing? What was your first book? What got you into wanting to write horror?
Yeah, so I'm a lifelong horror junkie. I like a lot of people who are around my age who are millennials.
Started reading Stephen King too early.
Oh, definitely. But it was Goosebumps and it was Are You Afraid of the Dark were really the two big things. I had a VHS when I was a kid of one night of Are You Afraid of the Dark for those who are too young or too old. It was part of the Friday night Nickelodeon lineup. It was called Snick. And it was like teenager focused. And so I'd gotten a VHS of one night of Snick, and it came as like an orange VHS. And there was like an episode of Clarissa Explains It All and an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? It was the episode, I can still tell you, it was the episode The Tale of the Hungry Hounds, which was the silliest premise at the time because it was just a girl forgot to feed the dogs, so they all died. She forgot to feed them one damn time. But there's this old man, and hey, I can still hear him echoing in my ear, why didn't you feed the hound? And I wore that tape out. I watched it so many times, that and the Shelley Duvall Fairy Tale Theater episode. It was The Boy Who Left Home to Find Out About the Shivers. And it was a guy who wanted to explore being afraid. And it was Peter McNichol, who was Janosch in Ghostbusters 2. He was the curator of the art museum. And he makes friends with all of these ghouls. He's at first afraid of them, but then he makes friends and they all go bowling together. And they're bowling using like the severed heads of these ghouls. I was like 7, but I loved it. I wore out both of those tapes, my Snick tape and my Fairies Hill Theater Shelley Duvall tape. And that's really where I pinpoint my origin of loving horror. I watched Arachnophobia way too young, developed arachnophobia. Didn't realize until like I was an adult that this movie was a comedy. Completely went over my head as a child. But then I had always been into writing. I ran Dungeons and Dragons games when I was in middle school and high school and through college and beyond. But I went to college, to film school. I did screenwriting in film school. And then I kind of moved away from that form of storytelling for a number of years. And it wasn't until I got back into the creative industry as a board game designer that I had some opportunities to really dedicate some time and energy into all my other creative passions. And writing was really my first big creative passion. The first thing that I wrote trying to write as like a professional was actually a graphic that ended up not happening, but I revisited it later, years later, a decade later. And now it's actually going to be the first in an urban fantasy YA series coming to Crystal Lake Publishing later this year called Rituals in the Night. And so that awesome. Book was something that I wrote originally in like 2015, 2016, wrote it as a graphic novel, then put it away for almost 10 years. And then finally dug back out when I felt like I was accomplished enough, like I was good enough to really do that story justice. But the first book I wrote for realsies that was like a book that came out, it was called The Island Mother. And it was a folk horror novel that I wrote after staying with my wife and her family at a resort in Hawaii. And I was thinking the whole time that it was like a fancy resort, and we were staying because my wife's uncle was the developer of the resort. We would never have otherwise been able to go to a place this swanky. And I made friends with all of the people that worked there because I've always been more into like the service side of things. I've always been the guy that works at places. And so I felt like I had more in common with them than the like kind of snooty people that were the guests. And so like I kind of made friends with them and I was talking to them. And I've always been really fascinated by Hawaiian folklore and Hawaiian culture. And it gave me an idea for a story and I wrote it and it ended up winning Publishers Weekly's 2022 Book Life Prize for Best Indie Novel in the horror/sci-fi/fantasy category. And I was like, well, that's some validation. It's my worst seller, but best award winner. And so from there, I wrote /tag and Everything is Temporary and kept moving. And now here I am. And with my 6th novel about to come out right around the corner. It's been a really interesting journey.
Awesome. Now, so I do want to talk a little bit about because you mentioned the game design that you do. So what kind of got you into game designing?
Being a huge stinking nerd.
Great answer.
I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons as long as I've been social, but really the gateway game that got me into game design and this is true for a lot of people, was Magic the Gathering, because there was an element built into the game of game design. It's, you don't get handed, at least you didn't back then, a pre-made deck of cards. Magic the Gathering, the way it works is you collect the cards, you buy booster packs, and then you assemble decks out of those cards that you play against your friends. And so you'd have hundreds of cards. So we'd get hundreds and hundreds of cards and you'd pour through every single one of them and go, oh, well, this might work with this card in a way that like has a combo effect or even an unconventional way. And it really gets your creative brain thinking about, okay, well, how can I make these mechanics work in my favor? And so from there, I was playing lots of board games. In college, I made a game called, what was it called? It was called Mary Curie's Isotope Balancing Party. It was a drinking game that basically used a deck of cards that I had written on with a Sharpie, and you were trying to balance isotopes without getting radiation poisoning, because Marie Curie was the person who discovered radiation, and she then died of radiation. So we were trying, that was the point of the game, was you want to balance isotopes without dying of radiation poisoning. And whenever you got radiation poisoning, of course you would drink. And so, yeah,
I hear drinking helps from radiation poisoning. Yeah.
It did in this game. I can say with it as a fact, but no, I got into, game design from there, and I eventually started to make friends that were in the board game industry. And it kind of hit me one day that, I know some people now that I can pitch a game to. I can take this seriously, and there might be a career in here for me. And at the time I thought, if I get one game out and it gets into people's hands, I'll be a happy boy. And then it comes out, and then it's like, it's okay, but I've got a new idea. And if this game comes out, I'll be happy forever. And then that game comes out, and then you make 3 more, and then you make 10 more. You find yourself in a career that was kind of a hobby, that was something you were doing with your friends.
Nice. And now I know you've done a couple games for Crystal Lake now, right?
So far we've got just the one, which is Ghostland. This is going to be Crystal Lake Publishing's first board game. I have a meeting next week to talk about, we've just moved into production of the game. So it's going to be hopefully shipping out to backers within the next few months. It was something that I reached out to Duncan Ralston with it because I had read Ghostland, and I thought there were rare times when a game comes into your head like fully formed. It's just like with a book, right? You get a kernel of an idea and you're like, whoa, well, let me mull this over for 6 to 8 months.
Start scratching away at it.
Right? Exactly. But with Ghostland, the whole game just sort of appeared in my head, and it was like, this could be a really cool game. So I emailed, I had never met or talked to Duncan before this. I messaged him and I said, you don't know me. I've got like 2 books out. I'm super low on the totem pole, but I have an idea for a game. Would you be interested in working on something like that? And he said, absolutely. I started pitching it around, and publishers were like, I don't know what Ghostland is. No, thank you. And then within 2 weeks of me starting to pitch it, I saw a posting from Crystal Lake saying that they were opening up a board game division. I went, okay. So I messaged Joe Meinhardt, who's the owner of Crystal Lake, and he came back and was like, absolutely, let's go. He put so much trust in me immediately with this game. And it is a really good game. Everybody is so excited to have this coming out. We're all so excited for people to finally get their hands on it. We've run some games with people online. We've brought it to some conventions, and it's always run and had a really positive experience. But now we're getting close. We're getting close to that date where you start to get antsy, and it's like, oh my gosh, people are finally going to get to experience this in their homes. It's going to be real.
That's amazing. So yeah, that's really cool. All right. So kind of shifting gears back to some of your writing stuff.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your writing process. Are you a pantser, a plotter, somewhere in between?
I am a D&D dungeon master for life. What that means is that I do an absurd amount of world building and character building. I call it scaffolding. I do a ton of scaffolding, and then I have maybe a couple plot points in mind. Maybe, if I'm really lucky, an ending in mind. But mostly I like to just have the characters as well developed and the world as well developed, because that's what it is when you're running Dungeons and Dragons. Best laid plans go to waste. You can have 10 different ideas of how a party is going to approach a situation, and 99% of the time they're going to come up with an 11th, and you're going to have to figure that out on the fly. And if you know how your world works, then when the characters do that thing that is unexpected, it ends up being better than anything that you had planned. Frequently, for me, that at least that's the case. And so I don't rely too deeply on outlines, but I do a lot of legwork beforehand.
So you kind of get to know your characters first. So that way, as the story starts to evolve, you already kind of have an idea of how they would respond to a certain event.
Absolutely. And I know how the world is going to respond to their actions. I feel like that was something early on when I was writing that I realized I needed to figure out, which was, okay, well, now I need to do some world building in the middle of my story. And it derailed me so hard that I thought, I don't like this feeling. I like being able to have everything ready to go. And when something weird happens, I go, oh, well, I already know how the world is going to react to this. Great. Done. When I was writing Slash Tag, it's kind of like a series of escape rooms. It's in this big haunted house that's kind of H.H. Holmes inspired. And every room, I had already created all the traps. I had created all the puzzles, everything that happens in all the rooms. I ended up only using like a third of the rooms that I'd made. But I had this paper. I had this kind of 4-page document that was the full map of the hotel. And it ended up really working well because later when Mark Tullius came to me and asked if I wanted to write a Try Not to Die, it was like a choose your adventure, Try Not to Die on Slash Tag. I said, absolutely. I've got so many rooms that are unused. I can just jump right in and revisit the world that I'd already built. And it was so easy to jump right in and write that because it was all there left over from the first pass.
Now, and with your new one, which I haven't had a chance to read it yet, I didn't get an arc for it. That's okay. My reading list is so far behind. So with it, I know it's set in a small town.
Yes.
Called Creed Falls. And there is this is also like a slasher, correct?
It is. It's a part slasher, part small town cosmic horror. So it's the Creed Falls massacres because there are 2 massacres happening from 2 different types of foe simultaneously happening. So yeah, on one hand, you've got the supernatural slasher, you've got your Jason Voorhees, your Michael Myers. And then on the other half, you have this sort of cosmic zombie plague that is spreading. And so that's what's going on in the town of Creed Falls when our characters start their fateful evening in the Creed Falls massacres.
So between, that and some of the others that you've written, have you found that your writing style, your process has kind of changed over the years, or has it stayed pretty consistent?
I think that the thing that's changed the most is my confidence in how I approach it. I don't think that anything has changed too drastically from my first book to this one, but the way that I approach it now is, and this happened to me when I make games too, or for years it happened to me, which is that every time I would write something, every time I would make something, I would say, gosh, this might be the last idea I ever have. I guess the well might just run dry. And of course, that's never the case. Creativity is a muscle. It's a use it or lose it skill. And as long as you keep using it, it's going to keep working for you. And you never know where ideas are going to come from. But now I can go into books with the confidence of saying, this isn't going to be the last thing I write. I'm going to be okay when I sit and do this. I know I'm going to get to the end. I know that this is going to come out in some form, whether it's, an indie press, a bigger press, or self-publishing. It's going to come out. People are going to read it. I'm not going to lose too much money on it, and everything's going to be fine. And so that confidence has really allowed me to write, I think, faster, because it's having that knowledge that like, it's not quite as the most precious thing in the world. The first thing that you ever do, you're like, this is my magnum opus. This is the greatest thing because it might be the only thing. And you hold it so tightly to your chest. But now I can write things and say, let me try something. Let me take a little bit more of a wild swing with this, because this isn't going to be the last thing I write. Creed Falls Massacres is certainly that, because it's 2 very different things happening in this story. And I wasn't sure when I wrote it if anybody's going to get behind something like this. The way that I came up with the idea for this, I love Freddy versus Jason. And I was on a horror panel with other authors like Brian Asman, who wrote Man F This House, Christina Griffin, who does the Melinda West Gunslinger Weird West books. Somebody had asked during the Q&A portion, they said they also loved Freddy versus Jason. I had talked about it at length during the panel because I talk about things all the time like that. I'm obsessed with horror movies. And they said to all of us, if you could have a mashup of any two versus horror movie characters, who would it be? And the first thought is Chucky versus anyone, because Chucky, I think, is the most versatile character in horror. But a more realistic answer was, what if it was, instead of Freddy versus Jason, what if it was Jason versus Night of the Living Dead? What if we had the killer not necessarily becoming a hero, but becoming potentially a tool that the survivors, that our heroes could try to harness, a missile that they could harness toward another even larger threat. And so I kind of thought that I was toying around with that idea. I thought that was a fun idea. And then, this is kind of funny. So have you seen the 2018 Halloween trilogy?
Yes.
So I actually, the book is dedicated specifically not to David Gordon Green, who was the writer-director of those movies. If you look on the first page, it just says, this book is definitely not dedicated to David Gordon Green. The reason for that was that I watched the first of these trilogy, the 2018 Halloween, and I thought it was such an incredible setup. It was generational trauma. It was Laurie Strode has a daughter and a granddaughter, and Laurie has known that Michael's going to come back forever, and she's been preparing. And her daughter hasn't. And when Michael comes back, Laurie is ready for him. And it set up this trilogy that I thought was going to go into, all right, now it's time for the family to take up the mantle. It's time for her daughter and her granddaughter to step up and really learn. That's not what happened. The second movie was garbage, and they killed Judy Greer. Spoiler alert. She never learned anything. She didn't take it seriously. And then the third movie, I was like, oh, well, they're setting up the granddaughter. And then she goes off on this Twin Peaks adventure that has nothing to do with Michael Myers. And I was like, what a squandered use of an incredible premise. And so I thought, okay, well, if we're going to have two types of villains in this book, let's have two generations of heroes. So Creed Falls actually starts with the final scene of what would be a horror movie. It's the killer, and it's everyone else at camp is dead. It's like an 80s slasher camp. And she's fighting him, and she gets him, and she gets away. And then we move forward 17 years, and she's got a daughter, and she's been training that daughter because she is sure that something is going to happen again. And it does, but the daughter is ready. The daughter has actually listened to her mom. And that's where we are with this book, is you've got one crisis on one half of town, you've got one crisis on the other, and you've got these two generations of final girls that are squaring off against each of them and trying to find a way to get back to each other.
Nice. Yeah, I very much like that premise, and it's definitely something I'm going to be adding to my TBR. So yeah, that sounds really good. And yeah, I agree on the Halloween trilogy. I think it did a great setup in saying, like, everything from pretty much after the first Halloween, everything else was pretty much just fan fiction. It kind of like, it was a reboot, but kind of not. It was almost like all of that, ignore it. It was just theories. And so I think it did a good job of like getting past all of the Celtic stuff and all of the weird stuff that they had with Michael Myers that we got into like 6 and 7 and all that, and kind of going back to just the core. But yeah, I thought too, and the second, especially the third part of that, I thought were very poorly done.
It was a real bait and switch in terms of what your expectations were. And it's fine to subvert expectations. I love a good subverted expectation, but you can't set something up as important as that and then not do anything with it. That is just a recipe for a letdown, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. All right. Who would you say are some of your biggest literary influences?
Ooh, Paul Tremblay is a big one. I write silly stuff. He writes very serious, and he writes things that have such wonderful ambiguity to them. Mm-hmm. It's a really true talent when somebody can write something that has a vague ending and doesn't leave you unsatisfied. Talk about more squandered potential. The movie version of The Cabin at the End of the World, I think they called it A Knock at the Cabin in the movie. It was as if Shyamalan actively tried to misunderstand the point of the book. But I loved that. I actually wrote a book called Kill Beth that was a love letter to Tremblay's work. And my first early drafts, I think I trembled too hard and I was way too vague with the ending, and I ended up having to come back and sharpen it up a little bit. I know that some people don't love the resolution of Kill Beth. No spoilers, but it is very Tremblay inspired. He's a big one of mine. The first horror book I ever read, which was way too young, but most people say Stephen King. Mine was Clive Barker. I read Cold Heart Canyon, which among Clive Barker books is really fucked up. It's got ghost bestiality orgies. It's a wild,
read that of his
novel, and I read it in like middle school. I was maybe 13, and the whole time I'm reading it, like I had to like keep picking up my jaw from the floor, being like, "You can write stuff like this? What?"
No, you can't. Just Clive Barker can.
Truly. And then I read his Books of Blood.
Mm-hmm.
Those were short story collections.
Yep.
And he writes such bonkers things with such confidence. He's got one, I might mess up the title of it. It's called In the Hills, the People, I think. But it's about a group of people who basically create a mech out of bodies of people tied on top of each other. And then they're like a giant walking structure. And it's just people that are all tied together, and they're all like wailing in pain because everyone's just formed the largest human pyramid of all time. And I was like, wow, In the Hills, the Cities. I think that's what it's called. I don't know, but it's so good. It's so weird. I love weird, good horror. That, I think, to me, absurdism done right is some of the best fiction because it is unknown. You can never guess the ending because it's something that you'd never consider, you'd never think of. It's wild. I love it.
I was looking behind me because I know I have a signed copy of Kill Beth over here somewhere. It's also one that is on my TBR that, like, I have the signed copy, which means I will probably read it on my Kindle. Yeah, because I think I got the signed copy from you at Books and Brews.
I think so. Yeah, because that had just come out for Books and Brews. Yeah.
So I was trying to look through. It's back in here somewhere, but
it's a small one. It's my shortest of my books.
So speaking of your books, I like asking this question because it's like your favorite kid kind of question. What is the favorite book that you've written?
Favorite book I've written? I think I have to go with /tag, as much as I want to say Kill Beth, because Kill Beth is the most personal to me. I spent 10 years working in theater professionally, and that was a lot of my experience went into writing Kill Beth. There's just the most of me in there, and the main character has okay, I'm talking myself back into it. It's Kill Beth. I was going to divert into but I
will say I love the cover of Kill Beth because it looks like a playbill, and I the theater nut myself, and so I see that and I'm like, oh, I recognize that.
Yeah. So my wife made that. We took a playbill that I had from like 15 years ago. We dug it out. It was when older than 15 years. I saw John Lithgow in a performance of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels years and years and years ago. And it was so good. And I kept the playbill. Oh, there it is.
I found it.
And so that's the actual top of my playbill of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And then we got it, we ripped it, and we got it filthy, and we put it in a gutter, and we photographed that. And then we got this other picture and made all sorts of stuff on that. And that was how we made the cover for Kill Beth. But no, the book has so much of me. The main character has OCD. I have OCD. His OCD is the same as mine. And a lot of the stories in there that are the weird, crazy things that happen with these actors and with these directors and in this possibly haunted theater are based on real things that happened to me. And so it's just, it so exacerbated my OCD after writing that book. Oh my God. I didn't realize at the time when writing it, but after I was done, I was like, oh no, everything that I've worked like decades to try and get better from have all resurfaced so strongly because I've been sitting in it for months and months. Man, yeah, that was the book I am the most proud of.
Yeah, like I said, I've not read this one yet. I've read Everything is Temporary, and I've read /tag, and I enjoyed both of those.
Thank you.
So I definitely need to, like I said, I obviously have it, and now I'm gonna. If we could ever get down to our TBRs, I swear to
Oh
Lord.
gosh, it's very difficult. Slash Tag is a close second because that's my love letter to all horror franchises, all the things that shaped me. But there's less of my actual self in that.
Gotcha. So this is always a fun one too. Do you read your book reviews? And if so, how do you handle the negative ones?
I do read my book reviews. I wouldn't say that I read all of them, and I wouldn't say that I read them too carefully because so many book reviews are just mostly just the premise rewritten and then like 2 sentences at the end. A lot of times like, okay, what I do look for a lot are the number of reviews. I think that, good art gets a reaction from people, whether it's positive or negative. And so I'm happy if it's a positive review or if it's a negative review. If somebody cared about something that they read from me enough to want to write a review, I am honored for that. I feel so grateful that somebody would want to write a review of one of my books, whether it's good or bad. And so when I get a bad review, I'm like, okay, well, hey, it made you feel something. It made you feel something enough to come in here and tell me that you didn't like it. That's fine. Sometimes bad reviews teach you how to be a better writer. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. It can tell you, okay, well, gosh, your characters were moving too slow in this one, or, the dialogue needed to get a little sharper, or something was maybe a little too vague. That is all critique that I can take. I would much rather have somebody read something and then give me constructive criticism than say, I liked it. What am I supposed to do with that? Great. Thank you. Cool. It was fine, but you could have had sharper character motivations for this person. Oh, okay. I can do something with that. Great. So yeah, I appreciate some of the negative reviews more than the positive ones.
I like the ones that are constructive. The ones that annoy me are the ones that it's like they're not very constructive, or it's like I had one for the Night Crew 2, and they were like, well, if you hadn't have removed these couple of characters, this book would have been only like 20 pages. Well, now you know why I removed the characters.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely. Well, and sometimes you get a bad review and it's like, I want to make this the blurb on the front of my book. I had one for Kill Beth where they were like, being in this guy's head was so noisy. What a nightmare of a life this guy has. 2 out of 5. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yup. You actually got it. You got the point of the book.
Well, and some of them are so like when you get into like the stars, it's so subjective. Somebody I've had glowing reviews that are like, it's so good. This book made me think for days. 3 stars. I'm like, what was a 5 to you? Is it the Bible? Is that it?
No, truly. Those are the only ones that truly frustrate me, is when they only have positive things to say and then give it a 3 out of 5. Because it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with this 3 out of 5? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to improve as a writer if you're not going to give me any criticism and you're going to write glowing things and then only give it 3 stars? How do I take this? That confuses and frustrates me.
What is your system? Like, what is your grading system? Yeah.
Totally.
So what scares you and how does that inspire your writing?
Is everything an acceptable answer?
Everything scares me and everything inspires me.
I'm a very anxious person. I have always been an anxious person. When I was like 7 or 8 years old, I went to the doctor because I was getting stomach aches. And he was like, you might be a candidate for one of the youngest people I've ever met to get an ulcer. You need to learn how to relax a little bit, bud. I'm an anxious person. I have OCD. So I'm not just anxious. I'm obsessed with the things that make me anxious. And I think though that's what makes me a well-suited person to write horror, because I really, really think a lot about the things that scare me, that make me uncomfortable, the things that are hurdles, that are either everyday hurdles, realistic, unrealistic, what have you. I think about these things too much, and you sometimes have to think about things too much to be able to really understand them and to write them in a way that at least that I feel is successful. And so by being afraid of everything, it makes me free to write anything.
That makes sense. I can see that. All right. So kind of shifting gears a bit. So, I started the Night Crew podcast as a spinoff to my own series, The Night Crew, which is all about a team of monster hunters.
Which is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
When I haven't read the second one yet, but when I read the first one, it was like the most happy comfort read for me. Because I grew up, and we'll get to this, I'm sure. My biggest influence of everything, the reason I am a writer, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's Buffy.
Mm-hmm.
But I also grew up watching the Blade movies and reading Blade comics. And there was something that was so comforting about reading into the Night Crew and being like, oh my God, this guy loves Buffy and Blade too. This is amazing. And it's a brand new story, but I feel like it's in a world I immediately understood. Because it felt like it was in so many ways a love letter to the things that made me want to be a writer. I could go on and on. I loved the Night Crew, and I'm so excited to read Night Crew too.
Appreciate that. Yeah, there was definitely some Blade influence in it, and the Supernatural TV series, and some Lost Boys, and that 30 Days of Night kind of. There was a lot of that influence in there. So, but I appreciate all that. So, and that I did not tell him to say that. So,
I was not coerced in any way. My love is real.
All advertisers are paid for their. No. So you got me all off script now.
Sorry.
So, all the scripted episodes I typically do are all like deep dives into some kind of a horror creature. And, what I always tell my guest, if you're going to be on the show, you do have to talk about your favorite horror creature or monster. So, Mr. I'm Scared of Everything, what is your favorite horror monster?
Gosh. Okay. So the low hanging fruit of it is Chucky. I already kind of said, I think that Chucky is the most malleable horror villain of all time. He has successfully managed his way through multiple genres. And Don Mancini has been writing him. He's the only horror villain who's been written consistently by one person from his inception in 1981 all the way through the Chucky TV series, which concluded in 2024. Chucky is everything, but that's not who I'm going to say as my favorite, because I have to go back to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The gentlemen in Hush are so interesting. They're so creative. So the gentlemen, what they do is they come into a town. They're these spooky guys. One of them is Doug Jones. So, he's got some really great physicality. They float and they're wearing these suits, and they kind of have these kind of shrivelly raisin heads. They kind of look like these spooky demon guys. And they've got these like long spindly fingers because they're so emotive. And what they do is they hover into a town and they open a box, and the box steals the voices from everyone in town. Everyone is rendered completely mute. And then what they do is they go around with scalpels, break into people's homes, and carve out their hearts. And they're trying to collect these hearts. And once they've collected enough, they move on to the next town to do this over and over again. Now, their weakness is simply a person's voice. If you scream, then their heads explode. But you are so helpless because you can't make a sound. You can't talk. You can't scream. You can't communicate to other people what is happening to you. And these guys, they don't even make a sound. They don't walk. They hover above the ground. So they'll enter your home totally silent, and you wake up and they're just standing over you with these big grins, with these big teeth and these like excited, hungry eyes. And then you're alive and silently screaming as they carve out your heart. They're terrifying. They're fantastic. And they're so original. I can't think of another monster that steals your voice. Like, what is that? That's something that I've never seen anywhere else before or after that episode of Buffy. I have to give it up to the gentleman, 100%.
So, and I was just looking, I was like, because when you first mentioned them, I was like, I don't remember them. And so as you're talking, I looked up and I saw some pictures of them. I was like, oh, I do. And yeah, it's the fourth season of Buffy.
Season 4, I think episode 7.
10.
Damn.
Yep. I happen to be on the buffy.fandom.com website.
I just ruined my Buffy cred by not knowing what episode.
You were
Not
only
like season 2, episode 3,
off.
School Hard, where Spike is first introduced. Gosh.
But I was scrolling through, and that is definitely original.
Yeah, they're so spooky. I love them.
Well, and there is a thing with, if you know, there's like this natural like catharticness in a scream, and you know, which is what if you're in severe pain and stuff, that's what you're doing, is you're screaming. So not having the ability to do that, or just being a silent, you know, it's almost like it takes away that catharsis almost, and you're just kind of trapped, you know, in there's no release.
Right. Absolutely. You know, they can't be stopped otherwise, which is so interesting. You know, you've got this character of Buffy who is super strong. She's a super good fighter, and she's useless. She has been stripped of all her power because that's not what hurts these guys. And yeah, just like you said, it is an emotional release that they are weak to, and you are hamstrung from being able to have that. And I don't know. I imagine being unable to call out to anybody as this is happening. It's just horrifying.
It definitely is.
Love it.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that episode now. Jeez.
Yeah. So I think it won an Emmy. It is a very popular episode of the show.
And they do have, so there were action figures for them that were made. So
yep. Yeah, I bought my mom the sideshow figures like 20 years ago, because my mom got me into Buffy when I was a kid, and we both were Buffy holics. Nowadays, she doesn't rewatch it every year like I do. But yes, I got her one for Christmas one year. It's still on her wall in her bedroom behind a door. It's hidden behind the door, but if you open it, you'll see they're there.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't watch Buffy like all the way through. I've watched the first couple seasons. I could have sworn I got up through season 4. I don't know why I'm not remembering that episode right now. As it kind of got towards some of the latter part of the series, I kind of fell off from watching it. You know, when Spike was good, and then bad, then bad, then good, then good. You know, so after a while, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. But yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch, especially that episode now.
It's an incredible hour of television because it also is a silent episode. No one talks because they can't talk. And so it is the ultimate example of visual storytelling from beginning to end. There's maybe 2 lines of dialogue in the whole episode.
I remember that when I went to the theaters to go see A Quiet Place. And I remember in the theaters watching it, because there is so little sound that happens. Every time a sound did happen, it seemed like extremely loud, because you kind of get used to there being nothing, and then like you'd hear a crack, and it's like, oh my god, that was so loud. Where did they come up?
Truly, it does. It really draws you in, and it makes those sounds feel so much larger as a result.
So which, by the way, I did not know that on Chucky, that it's been the same guy who has wrote him the entire time.
Yep. And he has transcended through all of these different genres, right? Because the first 2 movies are very much 80s slashers. And then the third one, he moves into like a military school, and everybody's a little bit more grown up. But then it became the time when movies were really silly and really campy. And so we went into Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky were very silly. And then he took some time off of that. And then he came back with Curse of Chucky and Cult of Chucky, which were back to basics when we started to get prestige horror. And so he came back into that and said, okay, I'm going to make Chucky scary again. And then we had this period where we could make TV shows. And he was like, all right, we're going to move Chucky to TV. We can now live in an era where, you know, this character has been with us long enough, and he has moved through the zeitgeist enough that he can be the headliner of his own TV series. I really love the way that I could gush truly for hours and hours about all the nuance of Chucky's journey from beginning to now, and all of the things that Mancini did that were firsts. That Chucky did it before anybody else.
Nice. And I've seen lists before that are like what the the body count is for all the different, whether it's Jason or Michael and Freddy and Chucky and all. And he's high up on the list. If I don't remember if he's like has the highest count, but he's definitely way up there.
He definitely isn't the highest, but he does kill a lot of people. He's a very murderous little doll and quite resilient.
So I know we talked about some of them, but kind of like outside of writing, what are some of your hobbies?
Yeah, well, I play a lot of board games.
Play a lot of board games.
I'm a huge nerd. I paint miniatures. I've been painting miniatures since I was like 12 years old. Warhammer figurines or honestly whatever I could get my hands on. I'm terrible at painting on a canvas, but give me a figurine that's the size of your thumb and I will spend 20 hours making it beautiful. I love doing it. It's so zen for me. I'll listen to an audiobook while I'm painting. And nowadays I have a bad back and bad arms and bad everything. But back in the day, you'd have to tell me like, hey, you've been doing this for 12 hours. It's time to like eat dinner and go to bed. Like I could lose days to painting miniatures. I love playing video games when I can. I do a thing we call it the Boo Crew. It's me, Andrew Nyberg, Andrew Van Way, and Ben Farthing. And every Monday we play video games together. We stream online.
Nice.
We just finished. We took us a year and change to get through Baldur's Gate 3. We just started playing Grounded and it sucked us all in immediately. And it was like, oh, this is dangerous. This is a dangerous game. So yeah, I like to do that. Obviously, I like to read. I like to watch TV and movies. I'll go through long periods where I have to absorb. Like after I get all of my creative energies out on something, I'll like be fallow for a month or two and just be like, I'm going to consume as much media as I can. I just finished watching Mobland, which I really enjoyed the first season. That was a lot of fun. Twisted Metal right now, which is so silly.
Twisted Metal.
It's so funny.
We watched that. I was a huge fan of the games.
Yeah.
And so as some of the different characters would come in, I was like, oh my God. Like when it had Axel, Edge. So I was like,
and Grim.
Yep. I'm absolutely loving that series. And I think there's going to be a third season.
There is. It got confirmed for a third, which I'm shocked because of it. It feels like a really expensive version of like a mid-2000s sci-fi show, like Sci-Fi Network.
Yep.
It's that
like
level
on the Sci-Fi Channel kind of
silly
thing. Yeah.
Comfort watch, but it can't be cheap to make. That has to be a really expensive show to produce. I can't imagine that it has a big enough audience, but hey, I'm not going to question it. I'm watching season 2 where before the announcement, it's like, I have to hold every episode like really precious because it's like, there's only going to be so much. But now season 3 is coming and that I can't wait. It has such an embrace of silly humor. Like one of my favorite jokes in it is that there's like this group of guys and they're like, we're the guys who make all the plans and we got all of our girls. They have to hang out in the bathroom. And then the girls are in there like, we get all the real work done while they're having a dick measuring contest in the other room. Cuts to the guys in the other room. They go, all right, now we're done with business. He pulls out a ruler. Now it's time to measure our dicks. It's like... laughed so hard at that joke. It was, to me, it made the whole show. It was just so funny. I loved it.
Yeah, I've been watching it and I'm all caught up. I mean, I finished season 2, but yeah, everyone, especially as it like season 1 was great. Season 2, as they brought in some of the new different characters with each one, I was like, oh my God, I remember them.
Right? Oh God, they need to make a new Twisted Metal video game. I'm shocked that they haven't announced something by now.
Since there's a TV show for it now?
Yeah. And an expensive show. Come on. Give us Twisted Metal back. That was such a major part of my childhood. That was the first time I ever heard Rob Zombie was in a Twisted Metal game. And it made me feel so cool.
Nice. So what kind of advice would you give for aspiring authors?
This is the same advice that I give to people who want to make board games. I've been asked this actually a couple of times at different like Comic-Con panels and stuff. The thing that separates an aspiring creative from a successful creative is that the successful creative finished the thing that they started. And that is like, that's it. Like, bar none. If you want to write, if you want to make board games, if you want to make video games, if you want to do anything in the creative industry, start something and then finish it. And I don't mean just like, oh yeah, I wrote a draft. Like, do the whole process. Get an editor. Go through, get alpha readers, get beta readers, find people to read your thing. There are so many resources online. There are so many groups on Facebook, on Reddit, all over the place to give your books away, to find people who want to do things. Even board games. There's websites like Tabletopia where you can have somebody online that's a total stranger sit down and play your game. There is no excuse at this point in time to say that I can't do this. If you have the time and if you have the desire and passion, there's nothing stopping you from finishing something. And at the end of it, it might not be what you had hoped it would be, but you will have learned so much that when you write the next thing, when you do the next thing, you're going to be that much better. Your first thing, as much as I had thought when I was doing it, and I think a lot of people think this, your first thing you do is not going to be the best thing that you do. It's not going to be your magnum opus. Nobody who's published became a master before releasing their first thing. They learned on the job. The difference is that they finished it and then they shopped it and they pitched it, or they self-published it and they did the work to put it out. And then they took what they learned from that and then they made their magnum opus some point after that because they kept learning by doing.
Yeah. 100% agree.
Yeah.
All right. So just kind of wrapping stuff up. Creed Falls Massacres.
Yes.
Make sure to put that S at the end.
Yeah.
Comes out January 27th.
Yes, from
correct?
Wicked House Athon Publishing. It's available for pre-order now, and you can get it on Amazon or other places that sell books.
All right. So before I kind of move on to that. So yeah, definitely it's on pre-order now. So, go and pre-order it. If not, January 27th, you can get it. I know I'll be adding it to my never ending, always growing TBR, but I recommend you do it as well. Both of my listeners. And so speaking of, where can both of my listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, I'm at Jon Cohn Author on Facebook, on Instagram. Technically, I have a TikTok. I made like 3 videos 4 years ago because my wife made me. I also have a website, joncohnauthor.com. You can go there to see links to all my books, all my games. You can also order autographed copies of all my books from my website as well.
All right. And I'll make sure and put the links to all that stuff in the show notes. So as you are listening to the episode and you want to learn more, definitely click on the show notes and you'll be able to find those links there. But other than that, John, I appreciate you hanging out with me for a little while and chatting about books and board games and geeking out over Buffy and all that kind of stuff.
It was so great catching up with you, Brad. As always, your smile warms my heart. I'm so happy to be chatting with you, especially since I'm not going to be at a lot of cons this year. I like starting my year off seeing a friendly face and having somebody to have a good conversation about horror with.
Always. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and end this now. So again, thanks for hanging. That's it for the Night Crew podcast and my conversation with Jon Cohn. I have links to where you can find John in the show notes. Follow him on all the socials and pick up his books. So if you had a good time, make sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave a rating. Hopefully 5 stars. If you want updates on my writing, you can follow me on Facebook or TikTok at Bradrick's Author. You can find copies of my novels wherever you like to buy books. But if you hop over to my website, bradricks.com, you can purchase signed copies of any of my novels. And while there, get yourself one of those Night Crew podcast t-shirts. I'm Brad Ricks, reminding you to stay out of graveyards after dark, question people who don't show up in mirrors, and go play a board game or two. Use your imagination. Until next time, keep your curtains drawn, your sense of humor sharp, and your blood inside your body. Thanks for listening.